He saved her without knowing her name. Now he's a hero to an entire empire. Ashes and starlight. The silence after war was always the loudest sound Sergeant Marcus Vale had ever heard. He picked his way through the twisted wreckage of Outpost, Meridian, his combat boots crunching on crystallized sand that had been fused into glass by plasma fire. The ceasefire had been called 6 hours ago, but the moon's crimson sky still glowed with the dying embers of orbital bombardments. His rifle hung loose in his grip, finger well away from the trigger. The fighting was over, supposedly, but Marcus had learned not to trust the word over when it came to war. Too many good soldiers had died believing in endings that turned out to be intermissions. The medical scanner clipped to his vest chirped softly, detecting faint life signs somewhere in the debris field ahead. Marcus paused, adjusting the weight of his field medic pack. Standard protocol dictated he should radio for backup before investigating, but his communications array had been fried 3 days ago during the siege. He was on his own, same as always. He followed the scanner's guidance through a maze of collapsed prefab structures and shattered mining equipment. The ethereal consortium had held this outpost for nearly 2 years before the joint human forces finally broke their lines. Now it looked like the surface of a dead world, all twisted metal and scorched earth under an alien sun. The life signs grew stronger as he approached what had once been a communications tower. Now it was just a spiral of melted alloy reaching toward the crimson sky like a metallic prayer. Marcus crouched beside a section of collapsed wall paneling, his scanner practically humming with proximity alerts. That's when he saw her. She was partially buried beneath a sheet of hull plating, one pale arm visible in the rubble. Marcus moved carefully, checking for booby traps or unexploded ordnance. The consortium was known for leaving nasty surprises behind, but as he cleared away the debris, his combat training gave way to his medical instincts. The woman, he assumed, it was a woman based on her slight frame, was barely breathing. Her uniform was consortium colors, the deep blue and silver of their naval forces, though it was so torn and burned he could barely make out the insignia. What stopped him cold wasn't her allegiance, though. It was her appearance. Her skin had an almost translucent quality like moonlight-made flesh. Her hair was the color of starlight, flowing in waves that seemed to shimmer with their own inner luminescence. But it was her ears that marked her as definitely not human. Elongated and delicately pointed, they swept back from her skull with an elegance that was both alien and beautiful. Marcus had seen consortium forces before, but always at a distance, through rifle scopes or targeting systems. Up close, she looked more like something from a dream than an enemy soldier. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse thready when he checked it at her throat. Professional assessment. Critical condition. Multiple injuries, blood loss significant. Personal assessment. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Damn, he muttered, pulling out his trauma kit. This is definitely above my pay grade. The smart thing would be to call it in. Let the intelligence boys deal with an captured enemy combatant. But his communications were down, and she'd be dead, long before he could hike back to the forward operating base. Marcus had taken an oath once back when he'd earned his medic certification. First, do no harm. It didn't specify species. He worked quickly, running his portable scanner over her body to assess the damage. Fractured ribs, probable concussion, severe lacerations across her torso and arms. Her left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, definitely broken. But nothing immediately life-threatening if he could stabilize her. The biofoam hissed as he applied it to her worst wounds, sealing torn flesh and stopping the bleeding. Her alien physiology seemed close enough to human that his medical supplies worked normally. Her breathing improved almost immediately, color returning to her pale cheeks. As he was splinting her broken leg, her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of deep space, not quite blue, not quite violet, with tiny flecks of silver that caught the light like distant stars. She looked up at him with confusion, and something that might have been fear. Easy, Marcus said, his voice gentler than he'd used in months. You're safe, I'm a medic. She tried to speak, but only managed a soft whisper in a language he didn't recognize. The words sounded like music, all flowing vowels and gentle consonants. When she realized he didn't understand, she switched to accented but clear standard English. "Why?" she asked, the word barely audible. "Why what? Why help me? I am—" She paused, searching for words. "I am your enemy." Marcus continued working on her leg, not meeting those strange, beautiful eyes. "War's over. Ceasefire was called this morning. Besides," he added, tightening the splint, "you're not much of a threat right now." She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. "What is your name? Human medic? Sergeant Marcus Vale, Colonial Marine Corps. You?" Another pause, longer this time. "Zara," she said finally. "Zara Nix." "Well, Zara Nix, you're lucky I found you when I did. Another hour and—" He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew how it would have ended. "Lucky," she repeated, as if testing the word. "I do not think luck had anything to do with it." Marcus finished with her leg and sat back on his heels. "Can you move? I need to get you somewhere safer. This whole area could collapse." With his help, she managed to sit up, though she winced at the movement. Her alien features were even more striking up close. High cheekbones, skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim light, and those incredible eyes that seemed to see right through him. "There is a shelter," she said, pointing toward a cluster of intact buildings about half a kilometer away. "Consortium emergency bunker. It should have medical supplies, power." "You sure it's not booby-trapped?" A ghost of a smile played at her lips. "I am sure." Marcus helped her to her feet, slipping one arm around her waist to support her weight. She was lighter than he'd expected, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. They made slow progress across the treacherous terrain, Marcus's scanner sweeping ahead for hidden dangers. "Why were you alone out there?" he asked as they walked. "I was not alone," Zara replied quietly. "My unit was conducting reconnaissance. When your forces broke through the perimeter, I wasn't separated during the fighting." There was something in her tone that suggested there was more to the story, but Marcus didn't press. Everyone had their secrets in war. The bunker she'd indicated was indeed intact, its blast doors still sealed but responding to her touch on a biometric scanner. Inside, it was more luxurious than any human military facility Marcus had ever seen. The walls were covered in what looked like living metal that pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. The air recycling system was so efficient he could smell something like jasmine and ozone. "Fancy digs for a reconnaissance unit," Marcus observed, helping Zara to a medical bay that looked like it belonged on a starship rather than in a bunker. "The consortium believes in taking care of its people," she said, settling onto an examination table that molded itself to her body. Marcus began connecting her to the alien medical equipment, grateful that the interfaces seemed intuitive enough. "Your English is pretty good for an enemy soldier." "We study your culture extensively," Zara replied. "Know your enemy, as you humans say." "And what did you learn about us?" She was quiet for a moment, those star-filled eyes studying his face. "That you are more complicated than our briefing suggested." The medical scanner chimed softly, displaying readouts in script Marcus couldn't read, but with enough visual indicators to show that her condition was stabilizing. Her broken leg was already beginning to knit itself back together with the help of the alien medical technology. "You should rest," Marcus said, pulling up a chair beside the examination table. "I'll keep watch." "You do not have to stay," Zara said. "You have done enough." "Where am I going to go? My unit probably thinks I'm dead and I'm not exactly equipped for a solo hike across hostile territory." He leaned back in the chair, rifle across his knees. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't die on my watch. Bad for my reputation as a medic." Zara's smile was stronger this time, and Marcus felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with combat adrenaline. "Tell me about yourself, Sergeant Marcus Vale," she said. "What did you do before this war?" And so, in a bunker buried beneath the ruins of a dead outpost under the light of an alien sun, Marcus found himself talking to an enemy soldier as if she were an old friend. He told her about growing up on the agricultural colonies, about joining the Marines to see the galaxy, about learning field medicine because he was tired of watching people die when he might be able to save them. In return, Zara spoke of her homeworld, a place of floating cities and crystal forests, where music was considered the highest form of art, and every citizen was expected to contribute something beautiful to society. She spoke of the war from a perspective Marcus had never considered, as something that had torn apart families and destroyed entire worlds on both sides. As the hours passed and Zara's strength returned, Marcus found himself forgetting that she was supposed to be his enemy. She was intelligent, curious about human culture, and possessed of a dry wit that caught him off guard. When she laughed, at one of his stories, the sound was like silver bells in the recycled air of the bunker. "You are not what I expected," she said as the artificial lighting dimmed to simulate nightfall. "What did you expect?" "Someone harder, more brutal. The stories we are told about human soldiers. Probably about as accurate as the stories we're told about consortium forces," Marcus replied. "Propaganda is the same in any language." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is the real tragedy of this war. We never tried to understand each other." "Maybe it's not too late," Marcus said, and immediately wondered why he'd said it. Zara's eyes met his in the dim light, and for a moment, the war and their respective loyalties seemed very far away. There was something building between them, Marcus realized, something that had no place on a battlefield but felt as natural as breathing. "The ceasefire," Zara said suddenly. "It is not permanent, is it?" Marcus shook his head. "Temporary. Both sides are regrouping, probably planning their next moves. Then we do not have much time." "Time for what?" But Zara had turned away, her expression suddenly distant. "There are things you do not know about me, Marcus Vale, things that may change how you see me. Try me." She was quiet for a long moment, then looked back at him with those incredible eyes. "What if I told you that saving me might have consequences far beyond anything you could imagine?" Marcus considered this. "I'd say that's a chance I was willing to take the moment I pulled you out of that rubble." Something shifted in Zara's expression, surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. "You are a remarkable human, Marcus Vale." "Just a medic? Doing his job." "No," she said quietly. "You are much more than that." As the alien night settled around them, Marcus settled in for watch duty, unaware that his simple act of mercy had set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power between two civilizations. All he knew was that he had saved a life, and in doing so, something inside him had awakened that he didn't quite understand yet. Outside, the crimson dawn was still hours away, but Marcus could feel that change was coming. Crown of Two Worlds Marcus woke to the sound of approaching aircraft. The deep thrum of consortium engines was unmistakable, different from human craft, more musical somehow, like a distant choir humming in harmony. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the bunker's sensor array. "Zara," he called softly. She was already awake, sitting up on the medical table with an expression he couldn't read. "They have found us," she said, and there was something in her voice. Not fear, but a kind of resigned acceptance. "How many?" Marcus asked, checking his weapons charge. "Marcus." Zara's voice stopped him. "Put down the rifle." "Like hell. I'm not letting them take you prisoner again, and I'm sure as hell not. They are not here for prisoners." Zara slid off the medical table, moving with surprising grace for someone whose leg had been broken hours earlier. The alien medical technology had worked faster than Marcus thought possible. "They are here for me." "What's the difference?" Zara walked to the bunker's main terminal and began entering commands. The display showed multiple consortium vessels in tight formation, approaching fast, but not in attack formation. "Because I am not just Zara Nix, reconnaissance officer." The bunker's blast doors began to cycle open. Marcus moved to stop her, but she held up a hand. "I am Zara Nix Valdris, third princess of House Valdris, heir to the ethereal throne, and High Regent of the Outer Spiral Territories." Her voice carried a sudden authority that made Marcus step back. "And those ships contain my personal guard." Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. "You're what?" "Royalty," Zara said simply. The human equivalent would be if you had rescued the daughter of your colonial president during a reconnaissance mission she was not supposed to be on. You're a princess. The words felt strange in Marcus's mouth. Among other things, yes. The sound of the approaching ships grew louder. Marcus could see lights through the bunker's entrance, not the harsh white of human military craft, but a soft pearlescent glow that seemed to shift through the spectrum. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Your guards take you home and I become a prisoner of war? Zara turned to face him fully, and in the shifting light from outside, Marcus could see something in her expression he hadn't noticed before. A weight, a burden that went beyond military rank. That depends, she said. On what? On whether you trust me. Before Marcus could answer, figures appeared in the bunker's entrance. They moved with liquid grace, wearing armor that seemed to be grown rather than forged. It flowed like water frozen in motion, and their helmets were works of art, elegant curves that suggested both beauty and function. The lead figure removed their helmet, revealing features similar to Zara's, but more angular, more severe. When they spoke, it was in the musical language Marcus had heard Zara use earlier, but with an undertone of urgency. Zara responded in the same language, her tone calm, but firm. Marcus caught a few words that sounded like his name, but the rest was incomprehensible. The conversation went back and forth for several minutes, with the guard captain's voice growing increasingly agitated. Finally, Zara held up a hand for silence and switched to standard English. Captain Theron, this is Sergeant Marcus Vale of the Colonial Marine Corps. He saved my life when he could have left me to die. He will be treated with the respect due to one who holds my personal protection. Captain Theron's gaze fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a targeting laser. When he spoke, his English was precise but heavily accented. Your Highness, this human is a security risk. He should be detained until... He should be honored, Zara interrupted, and he will accompany us. Your Highness, the decision is made, Captain. Marcus felt like he was watching a tennis match conducted in a language of power and protocol that he didn't understand. Zara, what exactly are you volunteering me for? She turned to him, and for a moment the royal bearing slipped away, leaving just the woman he had spent the night talking with. I am asking you to come with me to my family's stronghold. There are people I need to speak with, decisions that need to be made about this war. Your perspective, it could be valuable. My perspective? The perspective of someone who saved an enemy's life because it was the right thing to do. Marcus looked around the bunker, then at the assembled guards, in their flowing armor. Everything about this situation screamed bad idea in capital letters, but when he looked back at Zara, he found himself nodding. Okay. But I'm keeping my rifle. A slight smile played at Zara's lips. I would expect nothing less. The consortium transport was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Where human military vessels were all angles and armor plating, this ship seemed to have been sculpted from liquid metal and starlight. The interior was even more impressive. Walls that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, floors that felt organic beneath his feet, and a sense of space that seemed impossible given the ship's external dimensions. Marcus found himself in what appeared to be a passenger compartment, though it looked more like a garden than a military transport. Plants he didn't recognize grew in perfect symmetry along the walls, their leaves shifting color in response to some stimulus he couldn't detect. Zara sat across from him, no longer wearing the torn remnants of her uniform. Instead, she wore robes that seemed to be cut from the same material as the night sky. Deep black fabric shot through with threads that glittered like stars. The transformation was complete. She looked every inch the alien princess she claimed to be. Having second. Thoughts? She asked, noticing his expression. Third and fourth thoughts, Marcus admitted. This morning I was a medic looking for survivors. Now I'm apparently having tea with royalty on an alien spaceship. Technically it is not tea, Zara said, gesturing to the cup that had appeared at his elbow. But the effect is similar. Marcus took a cautious sip. It tasted like honey and lightning, with an aftertaste of something he couldn't identify but found oddly comforting. Where are we going? He asked. Nexus Station? Zara replied. It is difficult to explain in human terms. Imagine a city that exists partially in normal space and partially in what you might call hyperspace. It serves as the administrative center for this sector of consortium space. And you live there? I maintain a residence there, yes. Though, live is perhaps too simple a word. Zara's expression grew distant. I have responsibilities, Marcus. To my people, to the consortium, to the war effort. My reconnaissance mission was unauthorized. You went AWOL? I went to see the war for myself, to understand what we were truly fighting for. She met his eyes. What I found was not what I expected. What did you find? A human soldier who risked his life to save someone he had never met, someone whose people had been trying to kill him and his comrades for 2 years. Zara leaned forward slightly. That is not the behavior of the monsters we have been told humans are. Marcus set down his cup, feeling the weight of her words. So what happens now? You go back to your people and tell them we're not so bad after all? It is more complicated than that. There are factions within the consortium who believe this war is necessary, who profit from the conflict. They will not welcome evidence that contradicts their narrative. And there are factions in the colonial government who feel the same way, Marcus said. So where does that leave us? Before Zara could answer, the ship's movement changed subtly. Through the transparent walls of the compartment, Marcus could see they were approaching something massive, a structure that seemed to defy physics, all impossible curves and surfaces that reflected light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Nexus Station, Zara said. Welcome to the heart of the ethereal consortium. The docking process was smooth and silent. Marcus found himself flanked by Captain Theron and 2 other guards as they disembarked, their presence making it clear that he was both guest and prisoner. The station's interior was even more overwhelming than the ship, corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity, filled with beings of dozens of different species, all moving with purpose he couldn't fathom. Stay close, Zara murmured as they walked. And try not to stare. Some of our allies can be sensitive about being observed. Marcus nodded, though it was difficult not to gawk at creatures that looked like they had stepped out of dreams or nightmares. A being that appeared to be made entirely of crystallized light glided past, followed by something that might have been a walking tree with too many eyes. They traveled through the station via what appeared to be a combination of moving walkways and localized gravity fields. Marcus's inner ear protested at the strange sensations, but he managed to keep his balance and his dignity mostly intact. Finally, they arrived at what could only be described as a throne room, though it bore no resemblance to anything from human history. The space was vast and circular, with a domed ceiling that showed a real-time view of the stars outside. Tiers of seating rows in concentric circles, filled with beings Marcus assumed were nobles or officials of various kinds. At the center of it all sat a figure that could only be Zara's father. He shared her ethereal beauty but magnified, taller, more imposing, with presence that seemed to fill the entire chamber. His robes were similar to Zara's but more elaborate, and he wore a circlet that appeared to be made of crystallized starlight. The conversation that followed was entirely in the consortium language, but Marcus didn't need translation to understand the tone. There was surprise, concern, anger, and underneath it all, a deep familial affection between Zara and her father. Finally, the Emperor, for that's what he had to be, turned his attention to Marcus. When he spoke, it was in perfect, unaccented English. Sergeant Marcus Vale, my daughter tells me you saved her life. I did what any medic would do, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, hoping he was using the right form of address. What any medic should do, perhaps. But few would do so for an enemy soldier. The Emperor studied Marcus with eyes that seemed far older than his face suggested. Why? It was the same question Zara had asked in the bunker, and Marcus gave the same answer. Because it was the right thing to do. Simple words, but they have created a complex situation. The Emperor gestured, and the assembled court fell silent. You have placed us in your debt, Sergeant Vale. That is not a position the ethereal consortium takes lightly. I don't want anything in return, Marcus said. I just want to go home. And yet, your presence here may serve a greater purpose than simple debt repayment. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Sergeant, what do you know of the true cause of this war? Marcus glanced at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. I know it started with territorial disputes over mining, rights in the outer spiral. At least that's what we were told. What you were told, yes. The Emperor's expression was unreadable. And what if I told you that the mining rights were merely a pretext? That this war was orchestrated by factions on both sides who benefit from conflict? I'd say that sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory. Truth often does. The Emperor stood, and the entire court rose with him. Walk with me, Sergeant. There are things you need to see. They left the throne room, via a private passage followed by a smaller group of advisors and guards. The Emperor led them to what appeared to be a strategic planning center, filled with holographic displays showing star maps, fleet positions, and casualty reports. The war began 3 years ago, the Emperor said, gesturing to one of the displays. But the planning began much earlier. There are elements within my government who saw humanity's expansion as a threat to consortium influence. Similarly, there are elements within your colonial government who saw the consortium as an obstacle to human expansion. So they manufactured a conflict, Marcus said, beginning to understand. Precisely. Small incidents, escalated responses, misunderstandings that were allowed to fester until they became open hostilities. The Emperor manipulated the display showing a timeline of events. Both sides have been manipulated by those who profit from war. And what does this have to do with me? You represent something both sides have forgotten, Zara said, stepping forward. The possibility that our species can coexist, can even help each other. My daughter's rescue by a human soldier is already causing ripples throughout the court, the Emperor added. Some see it as proof that humans are not the monsters they have been portrayed as. Others see it as evidence that humans are cunning and manipulative. Which do you see it as? Marcus asked. The Emperor smiled, and for a moment Marcus could see the family resemblance to Zara. I see it as hope. Over the following hours, Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that went far over his head. Military advisors, diplomatic corps, intelligence officials, all wanted to hear his story, to understand his motivations, to gauge whether his actions represented a broader shift in human attitudes. Through it all, Zara remained at his side, translating not just language but culture, helping him navigate the complex currents of consortium politics. He began to understand that his simple act of mercy had become something much larger, a symbol of what peace might look like. There will be a formal ceremony tomorrow, Zara told him as they finally found a moment alone on an observation deck overlooking the station's central hub. You will be officially recognized as a friend of the consortium, given diplomatic status. And then? Then you have a choice. You can return to your people with a message of peace or? Zara looked out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. Or you can stay here as my personal advisor on human affairs, help me build bridges between our peoples. Marcus considered this. The smart thing would be to go home, to report what he had seen and learned. But as he looked at Zara, really looked at her, seeing not just the alien princess, but the woman who had shared her fears and hopes with him in a darkened bunker, he realized that smart might not be the most important consideration. What about the war? He asked. The ceasefire will hold for now. There are enough people on both sides who want peace to make it possible, but it will require constant work, constant vigilance against those who would restart the conflict. And you think I can help with that? I think, Zara said, turning to face him fully, that you already have. Marcus looked out at the impossible vista of Nexus Station, at the dozens of species moving through its corridors in apparent harmony, at the stars beyond that now seemed less like distant lights and more like destinations. Okay, he said finally. I'll stay, but I have conditions. Name them, First, I want regular communication with my unit. They need to know I'm alive and safe. Agreed. Second, I want to be involved in any peace negotiations, not as a figurehead, but as an active participant. Also agreed. And third, Marcus paused, suddenly uncertain. Yes? I want to know where this is going. Between us, I mean, because I've spent the last day talking to you like you're just another person, but you're not. You're royalty and I'm a colonial marine medic. That's not exactly a foundation for whatever this is. Zara's smile was soft and genuine. Marcus Vale, in the past 24 hours, you have saved my life, challenged my assumptions about your species, and agreed to help prevent a war. If that is not a foundation for something extraordinary, I do not know what is. As the artificial day cycle dimmed and the stars grew brighter beyond the station's walls, Marcus realized that his life had changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. He had come to this place as a rescued enemy soldier. Now, he was something else entirely. A bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope and perhaps something more. The war might be over, but Marcus Vale's real adventure was just beginning.